Next, we're going to use CSS transition to affect the opacity of div tags, and we're going to work with opacity in two different ways. The first div tag that will affect is ID'd opacity, and as I look down in my code, here it is, div ID opacity. I will come up into my rule stack and find the rule for it, and you can see it has a background color of orange, has the normal div tag things. So in order to make it also transition, I need the transition rules. So as a reminder, transition, we need three properties: all, a duration, so I will choose 0.5s for half a second, and I will go into the standard default ease. When you're using transitions, you also have to create browser prefixes. So the transition property will not always work the same in all of the browsers. So it's a little bit of a pain, but I have to paste 3 more versions of this. In front of one, I need hyphen WebKit, hyphen MOZ hyphen for Mozilla browsers, being Firefox, and then hyphen O in case people are still using Opera. And lastly, just a regular old transition plain to sort of future-proof our code for one day when the browser prefixes won't be an issue. I'm ready to create my hover state. Make sure I'm spelling this right. So the rule name is opacity, hover, get my braces in place. The main property for opacity is opacity. You can put in a value of 0, anywhere from 0 to 1, 0 being completely transparent, 1 being full opacity, and every tenth in between could be a 0.5, for example, is sort of half opacity. So when I hover over this, I want to take it almost all the way to transparent. So 0.2, get my semicolon in there. Unfortunately, opacity is another property that needs browser prefixes. So I will get those in place. Add hyphen WebKit, hyphen MOZ. And once you get a few of these in here, it's just a simple copy and paste, but I don't have enough in there yet to copy and paste. Alright, so I have my prefixes in place, opacity 0.2 for all, I have proper punctuation. Go ahead and save that. To click a few extra things because my Dreamweaver is being funky. Refresh my page, and there is the transition from 100% to 0.2 opacity. Now what I want you to note, however, is that everything in that div tag has become transparent. And sometimes that's exactly what you want. Maybe you want to reveal something or completely hide it on a hover state. So if you do, this opacity property is what you want. Sometimes, however, you want just the background color to change or become opaque or transparent. And the items inside, think of the things that could go inside of div tags. Text, photos, maybe you don't want those to be affected by the change. So there's another way that you can think about opacity, and it's how you enter the color into the div tag in the first place. So let's use this purple div tag to demonstrate that. This is labeled back opacity, and here's the rule for it. Currently you can see that it has this background color of purple. I could have also put pound and put a hexadecimal number. But let me just zip out to Photoshop here for a moment and remind you that there are other ways to indicate color. There's lab, which I've never used, CMYK, hexadecimal, HSB, and here is the RGB, the red, green, and blue build. And that's what we're going to be using to indicate this opacity. Because in addition to RGB, you can also tack on an alpha channel, and an alpha channel is for transparency. let's jump back to Dreamweaver, and in this background color property, instead of purple, let's start out by saying RGB. And if you're in Dreamweaver, Dreamweaver understands that that's what you wanted and it will pop up your color. But in addition to RGB, I'm going to enter A for that alpha channel. And now I'll simply pick a purple. Let me zoom up on this just a bit. So background color RGBA, this is the build, and the final number is the opacity. So let's do just the opposite on here. For this, I want to start out with a very low transparency, and when I hover over it, it reveals itself in full opacity. So I'm going to take this down to 0.1. Because this is a transition, I need to make sure that in this main rule, before I even write the hover, that I have those transition properties. So I'm going to move up to a rule where I already have those. So I can copy and paste. Now I'm ready to write the hover version of back opacity. Back opacity : hover. Get my brackets in place, and I'm just going to copy this entire background color RGBA line from my main rule, paste it, and rather than the opacity being at 0.1, I'm going to bring that all the way up to full 100%, which is 1. All right, let's see how that worked out. Save it, do my little Dreamweaver trickery, refresh the page. Okay, so now you can see that because I brought the background color down to 0.1%, I can barely see that background color. And when I hover over it, I transition into 100%. But the contents, the text, hasn't changed at all. Just as a reminder, the first variation with the property of opacity, everything changes. Everything inside it becomes opaque or transparent as well. So it really depends on the effect that you want for your own div tag that will determine which method you use.